The front door slammed behind me so hard that the brass number plate rattled in the silence of the street. For a few seconds, I simply stood there with one medium-sized suitcase in my right hand and my handbag hanging from my shoulder, staring at the wooden door that had been my home for almost 15 years. "Don't come back unless you bring a child with you," my mother-in-law, Shalini Verma, had shouted before locking it. "A woman who cannot continue this family has no place under this roof." Those words echoed through the empty lane, far louder than the sound of the door itself. I looked at my phone. It was 12:17 a.m. Not a single message. Not a single call. Not even from my husband. I whispered my own name as if I needed to remind myself that I still existed. "My name is Naina Verma, I'm 42 years old, and tonight I became homeless because I never gave birth." I smiled, but it wasn't happiness. It was the kind of smile people wear when their heart has already broken before their tears arrive. But this story does not start here. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Before we go any further, drop your first name and your city in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and tell me whether you've ever been judged for something completely outside your control. 15 years earlier, if someone had told 27-year-old Naina Sharma that she would someday be standing outside her own house in the middle of the night carrying everything she owned in one suitcase, I would have laughed. Back then, my life looked almost perfectly planned. I had graduated with distinction in commerce, scoring 91.8% in my master's degree. Within 3 years, I had become the finance manager of a growing pharmaceutical distribution company in Jaipur. At 27, I was earning rupee 87,000 a month, a respectable salary in those days. People called me disciplined. My friends called me dependable. My father called me his greatest achievement. Whenever relatives visited our modest home, my father would quietly open the cupboard where he kept my certificates. Not because he wanted to boast. Because he wanted people to know that daughters could also become the pride of a family. I still remember one afternoon when I was 11 years old. My younger cousin Rahul had accidentally broken my handmade science project just one day before the district exhibition. I had spent 32 hours building it. When I cried, everyone said the same thing. "He's just a child." No one asked about my effort. No one apologized. That evening, my father sat beside me and said something I never forgot. "Naina, people often protect the person they believe is more important. Don't waste your life waiting for fairness. Build a life where your value becomes impossible to ignore." At 11, I didn't fully understand him. At 42, those words became the foundation beneath my feet. I met Arvind Verma when I was 26. He wasn't extraordinarily handsome. He wasn't exceptionally rich. But he listened. At least I believed he did. He worked as a civil engineer with a private construction firm, earning slightly less than I did. During our courtship, we spent countless evenings discussing books, travel, and our dreams. He said he wanted a marriage built on partnership. Not tradition. Not ego. Partnership. That single word convinced me. Our wedding was simple. Around 400 guests. A community hall. Homemade sweets. No unnecessary display. When I entered the Verma household as a bride, I genuinely wanted to become part of the family rather than merely marry their son. The house itself was large. 3 floors. Built on nearly 4,500 square feet. Arvind's parents occupied the ground floor. His younger brother, Karan, lived upstairs after marriage. We occupied 2 bedrooms on the first floor. At first, everything seemed comfortable. My mother-in-law, Shalini, welcomed me warmly. She introduced me proudly to neighbors. My elder daughter-in-law works in finance. I cooked with her. We went shopping together. She even began calling me Beta. Looking back now, I realize something. Her affection always depended upon one invisible expectation. She wasn't welcoming me for who I was. She was welcoming the future grandson she assumed I would soon provide. During the first year of marriage, every family gathering included playful jokes. So, any good news? When are we hearing tiny footsteps? You both shouldn't wait too long. I smiled politely every single time, because I believed those conversations would naturally end. Instead, they became sharper each year. After 2 years without pregnancy, doctors suggested medical tests. I still remember sitting in the fertility clinic holding Arvin's hand while waiting for our reports. The doctor smiled kindly. There are some complications, she explained, but nothing impossible. For the next 5 years, our lives revolved around appointments. Hormonal treatments, blood tests, scans, procedures, medication schedules. Maury waiting. Maury disappointment. Every month began with hope. Every month ended with silence. Financially, we could afford treatment. Emotionally, the cost became impossible to calculate. We spent nearly 18.6 lakh across different hospitals in Jaipur, Delhi and Ahmedabad over 8 years. 3 IVF attempts. 2 miscarriages before 12 weeks. 1 surgery. Countless injections. Every failure quietly removed another piece of my confidence. The strange thing was this. The doctors never blamed only me. Arvin's reports also showed challenges. Reduced fertility. Treatable but significant. The doctors repeatedly explained that infertility was a shared medical condition. Not a woman's failure. Arvind nodded inside the hospital. Outside, he never repeated those words to his family. Whenever relatives asked why we still had no children, he simply looked away. That silence slowly shifted all responsibility onto me. No one openly accused him. Everyone assumed the problem was mine. Shalini especially changed little by little. Not overnight. Gradually. Almost invisibly. She stopped introducing me as her educated daughter-in-law. Instead, she introduced me differently. This is Naina. A pause. Arvin's wife. Nothing more. The conversations changed too. Drink this herbal mixture. Visit this temple. Wear this gemstone. Stop working so much. Maybe God is angry. I followed almost everything during the first few years. Not because I believed every suggestion. Because I desperately wanted peace. Eventually, I understood something painful. Nothing I did would ever be enough. Around our 10th anniversary, Karan and his wife Priya welcomed their second son. The entire family celebrated for 3 straight days. Decorations covered the house. Professional photographers. Music. Catering. Fireworks. I helped organize everything. I booked vendors. Managed payments. Prepared guest lists. Smiled in every family photograph. Late that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I quietly removed myself from the group picture hanging in the living room. Not physically. Emotionally. Because while looking at that smiling family, I suddenly realized I no longer belonged inside it. Still, I stayed. People often ask why women remain in situations that slowly destroy them. The answer is rarely weakness. Sometimes it's hope. Sometimes loyalty. Sometimes the belief that tomorrow will finally become different. Mine was all 3. Arvind wasn't cruel. That made everything more complicated. He never insulted me directly. He never shouted. He never raised his hand. He simply failed to stand beside me. Whenever his mother criticized me, he changed the topic. Whenever relatives made jokes, he laughed awkwardly. Whenever I cried, he hugged me privately but remained silent publicly. At first I thought silence meant helplessness. Years later, I understood silence can also become a choice. And choices have consequences. One rainy evening about 6 months before I was thrown out, I found Arvind sitting alone on the balcony. He looked exhausted. What happened? I asked. He hesitated before answering. Mother thinks we should stop spending money on treatments. I nodded slowly. I stopped hopping a long time ago. He looked relieved. Not because my pain had ended. Because the difficult conversation had become easier. Then he said something that hurt more than he probably intended. Maybe we should simply accept that this wasn't meant for us. Such a small word. Yet somehow, it felt as though I was carrying almost all of it alone. For several weeks after that conversation, life settled into something that looked peaceful from the outside. I continued leaving for work every morning at 8 to 10. I returned home around 7:15. Every month, my salary arrived on the third working day. Every month, I transferred rupee 68,000 into our joint household account without anyone asking. No one ever questioned where the electricity bill came from. No one wondered who paid the property tax when Arvin's business had a slow quarter. No one noticed that I had quietly renewed my father-in-law's health insurance for 6 consecutive years, after discovering that the previous policy had lapsed. Money has a strange habit. People rarely remember who provides it. They only notice when it disappears. My father-in-law, Mahesh Verma, was perhaps the most difficult person in the family to understand. He was 69, a retired government mathematics teacher. Unlike Shalini, he never insulted me. He also never defended me. He believed in avoiding conflict at almost any cost. If Shalini criticized me during dinner, he would continue eating. If I left the table in tears, he would adjust his glasses and pretend to read the newspaper. Many people would call him kind. I couldn't. Kindness that never speaks eventually begins to resemble agreement. One Sunday afternoon, while helping him organize old documents, he suddenly said without looking at me, "You know your mother-in-law isn't a bad woman." I smiled politely. I never said she was. She simply worries about the family name. I placed another file into the cupboard. And what do you think I worry about? He remained silent. That silence answered more honestly than words ever could. Karen, my brother-in-law, was different. At 38, he had inherited his mother's confidence and his father's ability to avoid responsibility. He ran a small building materials business that performed reasonably well, though he often exaggerated its success. He loved being seen as the future head of the family. Whenever relatives visited, he naturally took charge of conversations. His 2 sons, Arav and Vivan, were bright, energetic children. I genuinely loved them. Every birthday, every school function, every illness. I was there. When Arav struggled with mathematics in class 6, I spent 43 evenings helping him after work. His marks improved from 58 to 89. Everyone praised his hard work. No one remembered who had sat beside him every evening. I didn't mind. Children deserve encouragement. Recognition wasn't the reason I helped. But I slowly noticed something else. Whenever the boys achieved something, they belonged entirely to the Verma family. Whenever I contributed, it was simply expected. Priya, Karen's wife, often found herself trapped between loyalty and convenience. She wasn't cruel either. In private, she sometimes apologized. "Didi, please don't mind Mummy's words. I know she says too much. I wish things were different." Yet the moment the family gathered around the dining table, she became quiet. Silence seemed contagious inside that house. Everyone caught it eventually. The festival of Diwali arrived that year with unusual excitement. Nearly 60 relatives were invited. The house was painted. New curtains were installed. Silver utensils polished. I personally handled almost every financial arrangement. The final expense crossed rupee 6.8 lakh. Nearly 40% came directly from my savings. No one objected. After all, it was our family. On Diwali evening, While guests admired the decorations, one elderly aunt looked around before asking loudly, "Shalini, which grandson lit the first diya?" Shalini smiled proudly. "Karen's elder son." The aunt laughed. "Of course, after all the family line continues through him." Several relatives nodded. Someone glanced toward me. Another quickly looked away. The conversation moved on. Mine didn't. That single sentence stayed with me the entire night. Not because it was new. Because everyone accepted it as ordinary. About 3 weeks later, I visited my gynecologist for what I believed would be a routine follow-up. Dr. Meera Kapoor had treated me for nearly 11 years. She knew every report, every failed cycle, every tear. She closed my file gently. "Naina." I looked at her face. Doctors develop a particular expression before delivering difficult news. I recognized it immediately. "The repeated treatments have affected your health." I nodded silently. "You need to stop." "I already have." She hesitated. "I mean permanently." I looked out of the window. Outside, traffic continued exactly as usual. Inside, my future quietly changed direction. "There is still life beyond motherhood," she said softly. "Please don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I thanked her, paid the consultation fee, walked to my car, sat behind the steering wheel for almost 40 minutes without starting the engine. Not because I was grieving motherhood. I had already grieved that years ago. I was grieving something else. I knew exactly how my family would react if they ever learned there would never be another treatment. To them, hope had been my only remaining value. Without hope, what would I become? I decided not to tell anyone immediately. I wanted peace. Just a little longer. For nearly 2 months, I carried that medical report inside my office bag. Folded carefully. Unread by anyone except me. Sometimes secrets aren't lies. Sometimes they're simply shelters. Then came the evening that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Rain had started around 6. The entire family gathered downstairs because distant relatives from Delhi had arrived unexpectedly. Dinner stretched late into the night. Around 10:30, conversation drifted toward children, schools, inheritance, and family traditions. Exactly the subjects I had learned to survive. One uncle laughed. "Arvind, your elder brother's responsibilities would have been easier if he had children too." The room fell quiet. I lowered my eyes toward my plate. Before Arvind could answer, Shalini spoke. "What can anyone do if destiny is against us?" Someone sighed sympathetically. Another relative said, "At least adoption is possible." I looked up. For years I had secretly hoped someone would finally mention adoption seriously. Before I could even breathe, Shalini dismissed it with one sentence. "A stranger's blood can never become family." The words landed heavily. No one challenged them. Not Arvind. Not Mahesh. Not Karen. Not even Priya. I placed my spoon quietly beside my plate. "I've finished dinner," I said. No one stopped me. Around midnight, I was folding laundry upstairs when I heard footsteps outside our room. Heavy, purposeful. The bedroom door opened without a knock. Shalini entered. Behind her stood Arvind. He avoided my eyes. Immediately, something inside me became cold. Not angry. Not frightened. Cold. Because I suddenly realized whatever was about to happen had already been discussed before anyone came upstairs. I simply hadn't been invited to the conversation. Shalini closed the bedroom door behind her with deliberate calm. She wasn't shouting. That was what frightened me the most. People imagine life-changing moments arriving with screaming, broken furniture, or dramatic threats. Mine arrived with a quiet voice. She folded her hands in front of her and looked around the room as though inspecting a guest bedroom. Naina, she said, we've waited long enough. I glanced toward Arvind. He stood near the window. His shoulders were tense. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. What do you mean? I asked. For a few seconds, no one answered. Then Shailini took a slow breath. This house belongs to the Verma family. I nodded. I know. Our family has responsibilities. I know. Our family also has a future. There it was. The word. Future. It had become another way of saying child. Another way of saying not you. She continued, 15 years is enough time to accept reality. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of quicken. Sometimes the body prepares itself before the mind catches up. I have accepted reality, I replied quietly. She shook her head. No, you've accepted staying here. Arvind shifted slightly. Still, he said nothing. I looked directly at him. Are you going to speak? His lips parted, then closed again. That silence hurt more than any sentence his mother could have spoken. Shailini interpreted his silence as permission. We've discussed this as a family. A family. The irony almost made me smile. I had apparently lived inside one for 15 years, without ever becoming part of its decisions. You should leave tonight. The sentence was spoken with the same tone someone might use to suggest changing a curtain. I stared at her. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. It's after midnight. That isn't my concern. I looked back at Arvind. Did you know she was going to say this? He swallowed hard. Eyes knew we needed to talk. Talk. Another interesting word. This wasn't a conversation. This was a verdict. So you did know. He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. I'm sorry. Those two words arrived too late. Sorry after agreement is not resistance. It's only regret. Shailini crossed her arms. You have no legal or moral right to occupy rooms meant for the next generation. I almost laughed. For 15 years my salary had paid for renovations, repairs, taxes, furniture, insurance, and half the monthly household expenses. Yet suddenly, I was occupying space. I walked to the wardrobe, opened the drawer where I kept household files. Quietly, I removed a blue folder. Without saying a word, I placed it on the bed. What is this? Shailini asked. The receipt. She frowned. For what? The modular kitchen. I placed another file beside it. The solar panels. Another. The first floor renovation. Another. Your cataract surgery. Another. Papa's insurance renewals. Another. Karen's emergency business loan during COVID. The room became silent. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I simply wanted facts to exist in the room. For years they had existed only in my bank statements. Shailini glanced briefly at the files before pushing them aside. Money doesn't continue a bloodline. No, I answered calmly. It keeps a household standing. Her face hardened. Don't change the subject. I'm not. She took one step closer. You couldn't give my son a child. I inhaled slowly. Neither anger nor tears appeared. Only exhaustion. Your son couldn't give me one either. The sentence hung in the air like thunder before rain. For the first time that night, Arvind looked up sharply. Shailini's expression changed completely. What did you just say? You heard me. How dare you blame my son? I'm not blaming him. I spoke evenly. I'm stating what every fertility specialist told us for years. That's a lie. It isn't. She turned toward Arvind. Tell her. He didn't move. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He simply remained frozen. That silence answered everything. Shalini stared at her son. "You told me," he whispered, barely audible. "I didn't tell you everything." The room seemed to shrink. For years she had built an entire narrative around me. One sentence had cracked it. But instead of questioning the story, she defended it. "It doesn't matter," she snapped. "A man is still a man." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I understood something I should have realized years earlier. This was never about biology. It was about belief. Facts could never defeat beliefs that people needed in order to protect themselves. I closed the blue folder. "There is nothing more to discuss." She pointed toward my suitcase. "Good. I'll pack. You have 1 hour. I won't need that long." For the first time all night. She seemed surprised. Perhaps she had expected begging, arguments, promises. Instead, I folded my clothes carefully. Not because they were expensive. Because my dignity still belonged to me. While I packed, memories appeared one after another. The sari I had worn on our 10th anniversary. The sweater my mother knitted before she passed away. A framed photograph from our trip to Kerala. I picked up the photograph. It showed Arvind and me laughing on a beach. Neither of us knew then how quietly love could disappear. I left the frame on the shelf. Some memories deserved to stay where they ended. 23 minutes later, my suitcase was full. I zipped it, lifted it, looked once around the room. 15 years. Reduced to one suitcase. Before leaving, I removed my wedding ring. Not dramatically. Simply because it no longer represented reality. I placed it beside the blue folder. Arvind finally spoke. "Naina." I stopped walking. "I'm sorry. Again. Sorry. Always after the decision. Never before it." Without turning around, I answered. "I needed courage from you." A pause. "I never needed your apology." I walked downstairs. Mahesh sat alone in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. The pages hadn't turned in at least 10 minutes. As I reached the door, he finally spoke. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. It isn't safe." "No, it isn't." He lowered his eyes. "I wish." His voice faded. I waited. He never finished the sentence. Some people spend their entire lives beginning the right sentence and never completing it. I opened the front door. The cool night air rushed inside. Behind me, the house remained brightly lit. Ahead of me, the street was almost empty. Without looking back, I stepped outside. The lock clicked. One chapter ended. I stood there beneath the streetlight for several seconds before reaching into my handbag. There was one person I could call. Not because she would solve my problems. Because she had never once measured my worth by motherhood. I searched through my contacts until I found her name. Dr. Meera Kapoor. My finger hovered over the call button. It was 12:19 a.m. I hesitated, then pressed it. The phone rang only once. "Naina." Dr. Meera's voice was sleepy but alert. Doctors learn to recognize the difference between a late-night inconvenience and a late-night emergency. "I'm sorry for calling so late." "What happened?" For a few seconds I couldn't answer. Not because I was crying. Because saying the truth out loud would make it real. "I don't have a home tonight." Silence. Then she asked only one question. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Stay exactly where you are. I'll be there in 15 minutes. "No, please, I can book a cab." "I'm already getting dressed." The call ended. No unnecessary sympathy. No endless questions. Just action. Sometimes compassion isn't found in beautiful words. It's found in people who quietly show up. 14 minutes later, a silver hatchback stopped beside me. Dr. Mira stepped out wearing jeans, a light sweater and sandals. She looked at my suitcase. Then at my face. She understood everything without asking. She hugged me. Not tightly. Just enough to remind me I wasn't completely alone. "You haven't eaten properly, have you?" I smiled faintly. "I had dinner." "You pushed the food around your plate." I laughed for the first time that night. "You know me too well." She loaded my suitcase into the car. During the drive, neither of us spoke much. Jaipur looked strangely peaceful after midnight. Traffic lights changed for almost empty roads. Tea stalls served tired truck drivers. Street dogs slept beneath parked scooters. The city continued exactly as always. It amazed me how ordinary the world remains while someone's entire life falls apart. Dr. Mira lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. She handed me a clean towel. "The guest room is ready. You keep it ready." She smiled. "My parents visit sometimes." A few minutes later, she placed a cup of hot ginger tea in front of me. Only then did she ask, "Do you want to tell me?" I took a slow sip. "They said I had no right to live there because I never gave them a grandchild." She nodded quietly. "And Arvind? He apologized. But he didn't stop them." She looked down at her cup. "In my profession," she said carefully, "I've seen many marriages destroyed by infertility." I waited. The medical condition rarely destroys them. What does? The way people decide whose fault it must be. That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. Infertility hadn't ended my marriage. Silence had. The next morning I woke up at 6:05 out of habit. For several seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality returned. I expected panic. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just quiet. It surprised me. For years I had believed losing that house would destroy me. Instead, I discovered something unexpected. The fear had been heavier than the loss itself. I insisted on going to work on Monday. Dr. Mira disagreed. "You should rest. I need routine." She smiled knowingly. "So you're choosing survival?" "I think so." When I entered the office, nothing had changed. The security guard wished me good morning. The receptionist handed me 2 courier envelopes. My assistant asked about a vendor payment. No one knew that 48 hours earlier, my marriage had ended. There was something comforting about that. Life wasn't asking me to explain myself. It was simply inviting me to continue. Around lunchtime, my closest colleague Ritu noticed something. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much." She hesitated. "Everything okay at home?" I almost gave the usual answer. "Yes." Instead, I surprised myself. No, she didn't ask for details. She simply placed a lunch box in front of me. My mother made too much paneer. Again, compassion. Small, ordinary, real. 3 days later, I rented a 1-bedroom apartment. It measured just under 620 square feet. The kitchen was tiny. The balcony overlooked another building. The elevator made strange noises. But when I signed the lease, I noticed something. Every document carried only one name. Mine. For the first time in 15 years, I unlocked a front door knowing no one inside questioned whether I deserved to be there. That feeling was priceless. I gradually moved into a routine. Work, home, books, evening walks, weekend grocery shopping. There were lonely moments. Of course there were. Sometimes I instinctively cooked for two. Sometimes I reached for my phone to tell Arvind something interesting, before remembering we no longer spoke. Healing isn't dramatic. It's mostly made of tiny corrections. Then, exactly 17 days after I left the Verma house, something unexpected happened. Dr. Meera called me during office hours. Naina. Her voice sounded unusually serious. I need you to come to my clinic. Is everything all right? I've received copies of your final laboratory reports. I already know the results. These are different. My stomach tightened. Different how? I don't want to discuss them over the phone. Should I be worried? There was a pause. Then she answered carefully. No, you should come. I looked at the clock. 2:42 p.m. Without knowing why. A strange feeling settled over me. Not fear. Not hope. Something else. The kind of feeling that arrives just before life quietly changes direction. I picked up my handbag, informed my office that I had a medical appointment, and drove toward Dr. Meera's clinic. Completely unaware that within the next hour, a report would surface that would make Arvind stare at his phone in disbelief. And before sunset, he would call me once. Then again. And again. Until my screen showed 15 missed calls. The drive to Dr. Meera's clinic normally took 25 minutes. That afternoon, every traffic signal seemed longer than usual. I kept asking myself the same question. What report? All my treatments had ended. Every major test had already been discussed. There shouldn't have been anything new. Yet Dr. Meera's voice had carried a seriousness I had never heard before. When I entered the clinic, the receptionist smiled. Doctor is waiting for you. No paperwork. No waiting area. She had cleared her schedule. That alone told me this wasn't routine. Dr. Meera closed the consultation room door after I entered. A thick medical file rested on her desk. Beside it lay a sealed laboratory envelope. She didn't immediately hand it to me. Instead, she asked, "How have you been sleeping?" I smiled faintly. That's a doctor's question. It's an important one. Better than I expected. And emotionally. I still miss the marriage. I paused. I don't miss the house. She nodded. That's an important distinction. Then she slid the envelope toward me. I requested one final independent review of all your fertility records before closing your case permanently. I frowned. Why? Because something in your history never completely matched. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a 12-page report from a nationally accredited reproductive genetics laboratory. Most of it was medical terminology. Numbers, charts, genetic markers, hormonal analysis. At the bottom of the final page, one paragraph had been highlighted. Dr. Meera pointed toward it. I want you to read only this first. I read silently. Then I read it again. My hands became completely still. I don't understand. She folded her hands. I'll explain. She pulled another file from her drawer. It contained photocopies of reports going back almost 11 years. Naina, every fertility specialist focused on treatment. I nodded. But no one questioned one assumption. What assumption? That the repeated failures were primarily because of your reproductive health. I looked at her blankly. She continued carefully. The review panel found that your condition, while real, was treatable and never severe enough to explain every failed attempt. I felt my heartbeat quicken. So, she opened another page. The panel compared your records with Arvind's historical reports. I looked up sharply. You still had those. I keep complete files. She took a deep breath. Naina, according to the independent review. She chose every word carefully. The overwhelming medical probability was that successful conception had been prevented mainly by factors on Arvind's side, not yours. I couldn't speak. For 15 years. One sentence had defined my entire identity inside that family. You couldn't give us a child. Now, an independent review had concluded something entirely different. Tears finally appeared. Not because I had been proven innocent. Because I suddenly realized how many years I had spent apologizing for something that had never belonged entirely to me. I kept saying, I whispered. I kept believing. Dr. Mira handed me a tissue. You believed what everyone repeated. I closed my eyes. Images rushed back. Every ritual. Every herbal medicine. Every whispered comment. Every family gathering. Every apology I had made. Every time I had lowered my head. All built upon an incomplete truth. There is something else, Dr. Mira said quietly. I looked at her. The review committee also noted that several recommendations made by specialists years ago. She tapped another page. Were never followed. What recommendations? They advised advanced treatment specifically for Arvind. I frowned. I don't remember that. She slid an old consultation note across the desk. There it was. The doctor's handwriting. Recommended male factor intervention before additional IVF cycles. I stared at the date. It was 9 years old. Naina. She spoke gently. Did anyone ever show you this page? I searched my memory. Hospital corridors. Consultation rooms. Prescription slips. No, it was in the original file. A chill ran through me. Not because someone had necessarily hidden it, but because no one had considered it important enough to discuss. Everyone had continued treating me, testing me, injecting me, questioning me, while a critical recommendation directed toward my husband quietly remained buried inside paperwork. I laughed once. It sounded almost unfamiliar. 15 years. I whispered. 15 years. I left the clinic carrying the report inside a plain brown envelope. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It couldn't return the lost years. But it gave me something I hadn't possessed in a very long time. The truth. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, life inside the Verma house had begun changing in ways no one expected. After I left, practical problems appeared surprisingly quickly. The monthly household budget no longer balanced. Bills arrived. Renewals were due. The accountant called asking about tax documents that only I understood. The domestic helper resigned because salary payments became irregular. Small inconveniences accumulated. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to expose how much invisible work I had quietly handled. For years, everyone had assumed the household ran naturally. Now they discovered that systems don't maintain themselves. People do. One evening, Mahesh asked casually during dinner, "Has anyone spoken to Naina?" The table became quiet. Shalini answered without looking up. She made her choice. Mahesh frowned. We asked her to leave. No, Shalini corrected firmly. She left. The difference mattered to her. Not because it changed reality. Because it changed the story she told herself. Arvind barely touched his food. He had lost nearly 4 kilograms in less than 3 weeks. He continued going to work. He continued coming home. But every room reminded him of absence. The finance files. The empty wardrobe. The missing coffee mug. The silence upstairs. Regret often arrives disguised as routine. 2 days after my clinic visit, Dr. Mira received an official finalized copy of the review. As required by medical protocol, Duplicate notifications were automatically sent to every physician whose historical records formed part of the case. One of those records belonged to the fertility specialist who had treated both Arvind and me years earlier. The specialist recognized the names immediately. He also realized the conclusions corrected several long-standing assumptions. Out of professional responsibility, he contacted Arvind, not to assign blame, simply to ensure he received the updated findings. The conversation lasted less than 8 minutes. When it ended, Arvind reportedly remained seated in his office chair for almost half an hour without speaking. Then he reached for his phone. He called me. Once, no answer. Again, no answer. Again, again, again. I was driving home with my phone on silent inside my handbag. By the time I reached my apartment, the screen lit up. 15 missed calls, Arvind. I stared at the number for several long seconds. Then the phone began ringing again. His name filled the screen. This time, I answered. I looked at the screen until it almost stopped ringing. For 15 years, I had answered every call from Arvind before the second ring. That evening, I let him wait. Not to punish him. Simply because, for the first time in a very long time, I realized I had the choice. Just before the call disconnected, I pressed the green button. Hello. There was only breathing on the other end. Heavy, uneven. Then his voice finally came. Naina. It sounded older. Not physically. Emotionally. Yes. Another silence. I just received a call from Dr. Suresh, the fertility specialist. I know. You know. I met Dr. Meera 2 days ago. His breathing became even slower. They reviewed everything. Yes. I didn't know. He stopped. I waited. I swear to you, I didn't know the final review would say this. I believe you. He sounded surprised. You do? Yes. I don't think you planned this. Another pause. But planning isn't the only way people hurt each other. He didn't interrupt. For the first time in years. He simply listened. I spent 15 years apologizing for something that wasn't mine alone. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Sorry. A word that had become too small for everything it was trying to carry. Arvind, I said quietly, do you know what I remember most? What? Not the treatments, not the injections, not the surgeries. He whispered. Then what? The dinners. He sounded confused. The dinners. Every family gathering where someone looked at me with pity. Every joke. Every blessing that ended with, may you become a mother soon. Every time your mother blamed me. And every single time. I stopped. You stayed silent. His breathing became shaky. I thought keeping peace was helping. No, you were keeping comfort. The sentence landed heavily. Because both of us knew it was true. Peace protects everyone. Comfort protects the person who already has power. He had mistaken one for the other. I should have spoken. Yes. I should have told everyone about my reports. Yes. I should have stood beside you. Yes. No anger. No shouting. Only facts. Sometimes facts hurt more than accusations because no one can argue with them. He finally asked the question I knew had been building inside him since the call began. Can we meet? I looked through my apartment window. Children were playing in the society garden below. Someone was watering plants. A delivery boy parked his scooter near the entrance. Life continued. I don't think meeting will change what happened. I know. I just need to see you. I remained silent. He added quietly, please. After almost a minute, I answered. Tomorrow. Where? The cafe opposite Central Park. The one we used to visit. Yes. What time? 4. I'll be there. The call ended. I placed the phone on the table. For nearly 10 minutes I simply sat there, not wondering what I would say, wondering whether the man I had loved for 15 years had finally become ready to hear it. The next afternoon, I reached the cafe 10 minutes early. Old habit. Arvind arrived exactly at 4. He looked different. His hair seemed grayer. His shirt was neatly pressed as always, but somehow too loose around his shoulders. He had indeed lost weight. For a few seconds we simply looked at one another. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us cried. He pulled out the chair opposite mine. Thank you for coming. I said I would. The waiter brought water. Neither of us touched it. Finally, Arvind placed a brown envelope on the table. I brought copies of every report. I already have them. I know. He pushed the envelope back into his bag. I wasn't thinking. No, you weren't. He gave a sad smile. You've become very direct. I've become very honest. He nodded. I deserved that. For the next hour we talked more honestly than we had during the previous 15 years. Not about children. About choices. About fear. About silence. He admitted that years ago, one doctor had briefly explained that his fertility required further treatment. He had felt ashamed. Instead of discussing that shame, he buried it. When his mother naturally assumed I was the problem, correcting her became harder with each passing year. 1 month became 1 year. 1 year became 15. I kept telling myself I'd explain everything later. He looked at his hands. But later never came. I believed him. That was the tragedy. He hadn't chosen cruelty. He had chosen postponement. And postponed truth eventually becomes betrayal. I never wanted you to carry all the blame. You allowed it. Yes, I did. There was no defense left. Only acceptance. As we prepared to leave, he asked softly, Would yous come home? I looked at him carefully. Which home? He understood immediately. The house. The word itself had become complicated. My home isn't there anymore, I answered. I know Mother was wrong. It wasn't only your mother. He lowered his eyes. I know. I'm not refusing because I'm angry. He looked back at me. I'm refusing because I finally understand something. What? A house where your dignity depends on someone else's approval was never really your home. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were filled with quiet regret. I wish I had understood that before. So do I. We walked out together. At the parking lot we stopped. There was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to prove. Only consequences. As I unlocked my car, he asked one final question. Is there any chance for us? I thought carefully before answering. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Because he deserved the truth this time. Trust isn't destroyed in one night, Arvind. I met his eyes. It disappears one silence at a time. He didn't reply. He simply nodded. For the first time since I had met him. He accepted the truth without asking anyone to make it easier. Over the next few weeks we spoke only twice. Both conversations lasted less than 10 minutes. Neither of us discussed reconciliation. There were no emotional promises. No dramatic declarations. Instead, we spoke about practical matters. Bank accounts. Insurance policies. Documents that needed signatures. It was strange. For years we had avoided difficult conversations. Now, after everything had fallen apart, Honesty had finally become possible. Life settled into a rhythm I had never expected to enjoy. I woke at 6, made my own breakfast, walked 20 minutes before work, returned home to an apartment that stayed exactly as I left it. At first the silence felt unfamiliar. Soon, it began to feel peaceful. No one commented on what I cooked. No one asked where I was going. No one measured my worth against a child